The Galactic Federation's observation deck stretched like a cathedral of glass and steel, holographic displays floating in mid-air, each projecting the vital statistics of apex predators, the Cubs, scattered across multiple high-security training facilities. The Federation, in its pursuit of ultimate interstellar control, had engineered these young predators for one purpose: absolute obedience and lethal precision. Every muscle, every neural pathway, every instinct was manipulated in the laboratories to produce creatures that could serve as living weapons. Yet, in this grand orchestration of science and authority, a single human could alter the expected course of events. Dr. Kaela Rynn, a behavioral specialist assigned to supervise the training of the Apex Cubs, stepped into the observation room, her presence a stark contrast to the sterile perfection surrounding her. Unlike the holographic AI assistants, her eyes reflected uncertainty, empathy, and determination. She knew the Federation's intentions, control through fear and reinforcement, but she also understood the untapped power of trust. Commanders and high-ranking officials clad in the Federation's ceremonial uniform were already present. Their gaze swept over Kaela as if measuring the weight of her potential. General Thaler, the officer in charge of Predator compliance, spoke with a tone that left no room for dissent. "You will ensure that the Cubs obey, Dr. Rynn," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of machinery. Kaela's jaw tightened. She had trained for this, yet the tension in her chest reminded her of the stakes. The Cubs were not just instruments of war. They were sentient beings, each capable of choice, each capable of loyalty or defiance. Her mind raced, calculating the implications of any mistake. As she moved toward the training chamber, the first signs of unusual behavior caught her eye. One of the Cubs, a Deathworlder pup with scales glinting like liquid metal, lingered at the edge of its pen, tilting its head curiously. This was unpredictable behavior, subtle yet noticeable, and Kaela's pulse quickened. She sensed that this moment, mere seconds into the observation, would define the trajectory of control, trust, and rebellion. The Federation's protocols were designed for absolute compliance, but Kaela knew that within every programmed instinct, there was room for choice. If even one of the Cubs acted independently, it could unravel years of genetic conditioning. The thought was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. "Are you ready to begin?" Thaler's question snapped her back to the present. Kaela nodded, taking a deep breath. She moved past the reinforced glass walls of the chamber, her hand brushing the edge of the console. Sparks from the floor's energy grid reflected off the metallic scales of the Cubs, casting them in an almost divine light. In that instant, Kaela understood the delicate balance of the situation. One wrong gesture, one hesitation, and the Federation would have a reason to terminate the experiment and her career. But if she succeeded, she could demonstrate a new paradigm of loyalty, one built on choice rather than fear. Kaela noticed the smallest Cub stepping forward, seemingly ignoring the Federation's commands. Its golden eyes locked with hers, and she felt an instant connection, a silent communication. Was it a sign of defiance? Or an instinctive recognition of her intentions? The viewers are left questioning, will this single Cub change everything? Kaela Rynn stepped into the inner chamber of the Galactic Federation's Predator training facility. The hum of energy grids beneath the floor reverberated through the metal walls, a constant reminder of the lethal power contained within. Every apex predator in the room, scaled, clawed, and genetically enhanced, was bred to obey without question. The Federation expected strict compliance, zero deviation, and Kaela's task was to ensure that these living weapons did exactly what they were programmed to do. Yet, as she walked down the polished corridor, her boots echoing faintly in the metallic tunnel, a creeping realization gripped her. Her position was weak. She was alone against a system designed for control, surrounded by officers who regarded her both as a tool and a threat. Any misstep, hesitation, or misjudgment could lead to instant termination, not just of the experiment, but of her career, possibly her freedom. Her mind flickered to the small Cub she had noticed earlier, the Deathworlder pup. Its golden eyes had locked with hers, a subtle but undeniable signal. Was it instinct or something more? The Federation had expected obedience, yet this creature had already hinted at choice. Kaela's pulse quickened, not just with fear, but with anticipation. She knew she had to tread carefully. The cub's behavior could become the linchpin of the entire operation, for better or worse. Kaela paused at the console, reviewing the neural control interface. Lines of code scrolled endlessly, representing weeks of genetic programming designed to suppress any individual decision-making in the cubs. The Federation had expected that obedience could be guaranteed through brute force and precision science, but Kaela doubted the system. She questioned herself. Could she influence these apex predators without breaking Federation protocols? Could trust be more powerful a tool than coercion? And if she failed, what would happen to the cubs and to her? Her hands hovered over the interface. Every command she issued had to balance safety, compliance, and opportunity for choice. One wrong input, one misjudgment, and the cubs could become unpredictable in a way the Federation would immediately penalize. General Thalor's voice crackled over the intercom. Dr. Rynn, status report. We expect complete control over the Apex Cubs. Any deviations will result in immediate protocol enforcement. Remember, these are Federation assets, not companions. Kaela swallowed. The words were sharp, designed to instill fear, and they worked. But Kaela also understood something crucial. Fear would never yield loyalty. She had seen countless subjects obey out of fear, only to rebel in secrecy when left unsupervised. If she wanted to maintain the cubs' compliance, she needed a bond stronger than fear, and that meant placing herself in a vulnerable position. Open, unprotected, yet confident. As she moved closer to the containment units, she noticed the cubs shifting subtly. The smallest Deathworlder pup had taken a few steps toward the barrier, its head tilted with curiosity. This was the first tangible sign of choice, a glimmer of hope, but also a reminder of the precariousness of her position. Every eye in the observation deck was fixed on her movements, every sensor monitoring her strategy. Just as Kaela reached the central chamber, a warning alarm sounded. Red lights flared across the room. The Federation's AI system flagged unexpected behavior in multiple cubs. Their neural markers were slightly out of sync, indicating a small but significant deviation from programmed obedience. Kaela's heart raced. She had anticipated this, but not so early. The Federation officers rushed toward consoles, typing furiously, issuing commands that the cubs ignored entirely. The Deathworlder pup looked at Kaela, almost as if seeking her guidance. She whispered softly, "It's okay, trust me." And a subtle shift occurred. The cubs responded not to orders, but to her intent. Viewers now ask themselves, will Kaela's influence be enough to maintain control without triggering the Federation's intervention? Can she survive this? The stakes were at their highest within the first minute of engagement, ensuring the audience remains intact and invested. Kaela knew she could not rely solely on instinct. She implemented micro-adjustments, subtle cues and gestures that communicated trust without revealing weakness. Every movement had to balance risk and influence. If the Federation detected her methods as unauthorized, they could terminate the experiment or enforce direct neural suppression on the cubs. She observed the cubs carefully. The medium-sized predators mirrored the Deathworlder pup's defiance, a ripple effect beginning to form. Kaela realized she was not just influencing a single creature, but potentially an entire system. Her position was weak in numbers, authority, and firepower, but her intellect and empathy offered an unexpected leverage. Kaela's mind raced. Could one human really influence apex predators trained for war? And would the cubs follow their instincts or choose loyalty instead?
Kaela Rynn stood motionless for a heartbeat, letting the hum of the containment chamber settle around her. The Deathworlder pup, whose golden eyes had already hinted at defiance, now took a deliberate step forward, ignoring the neural directives projected from the Federation's control consoles. Every instinct it had been bred with screamed for obedience, but something within Kaela's presence seemed to override programming, if only slightly. The medium-sized cubs mirrored the pup, their claws tapping softly on the energy floor, a synchronized rhythm that suggested anticipation rather than aggression. Kaela's heart raced. Could one human really inspire choice in creatures designed for absolute compliance? The thought alone made her pulse quicken, but there was no time to hesitate. The Federation was already monitoring every anomaly. A sudden alarm flared across the chamber. Red lights cast harsh reflections on the metallic walls, and the holographic consoles buzzed with error notifications. Kaela's pulse skipped. The Federation's AI had detected the Cub's deviation. Every officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Rynn, immediate intervention required. Cubs are non-compliant. Override protocols ready for activation." Kaela's mind raced. If the overrides triggered, the Cubs would lose every ounce of autonomy. But if she hesitated, the Federation would escalate. She took a deep breath and whispered, barely audible over the mechanical hum, "It's okay. Trust me." The Deathworlder pup paused, its gaze locked on her. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped fully toward Kaela, its massive frame radiating a mix of curiosity and protective intent. The other Cubs, now visibly influenced by the pup's leadership, followed suit. A ripple of conscious choice spread across the chamber. Will the Cubs obey the Federation, or will they choose loyalty instead? Can Kaela maintain control without triggering a total system override? What will happen the moment the Federation realizes they are losing influence? Kaela knew that this was the turning point. The Federation had trained the Cubs to follow commands without question, but they were now testing the strength of human influence. Every gesture she made, every subtle shift of her posture, was carefully calibrated to communicate empathy and trust rather than authority. The first officer attempting to intervene was met with an unexpected barrier. The Cubs formed a semicircle around Kaela, blocking access without aggression, their eyes gleaming with awareness. It was clear, their decision to follow her was conscious, deliberate, and irreversible in that moment. Another alarm flashed, louder this time. Holographic readouts indicated neural spikes across the entire group of apex predators, all synchronized to the Deathworlder pup's subtle signals. Kaela's presence had triggered a behavioral cascade, one that no Federation algorithm had anticipated. One by one, the Cubs acknowledged Kaela's presence. The largest predator, trained for combat, lowered its stance in a protective formation around her. Medium-sized predators shifted to flank positions, creating a human-centered defensive perimeter. The smallest Cubs, who had initially shown hesitation, now approached, head tilted toward her, eyes glowing softly, seeking silent instruction. Kaela's mind raced with questions, but also hope. Could this moment truly define a new type of loyalty, one based on trust rather than force? Will this act of trust be enough to sway all the Cubs? Can a single human redefine the instincts of apex predators? How will the Federation respond to this unprecedented rebellion? Empire's shock and reaction. From the observation deck, General Thalor's face contorted in disbelief. Impossible! No organism trained for obedience should act independently. Override now! Commands were rapidly issued to the containment systems. Neural impulses shot through the floor grids, targeting the Cubs' behavioral pathways. The room trembled slightly as the apex predators reacted, yet none followed the direct neural commands. Instead, each one maintained its protective formation around Kaela, demonstrating that the human influence outweighed their programming. The Federation officers were scrambling, attempting to assess and regain control. But Kaela's calm, deliberate stance communicated something no algorithm could replicate: authority through empathy, not fear. The Cubs' defiance was not chaotic, it was structured, intentional, and synchronized. The Deathworlder pup, as the leader, gave subtle gestures with its massive head and tail, and the others mirrored these actions perfectly. It was as if the apex predators were thinking collectively, choosing Kaela as their alpha, not out of programming, but out of mutual respect and trust. The Federation had expected compliance, but what happens when choice defies programming? Will Kaela survive this act of rebellion without provoking catastrophic retaliation?
The chamber had fallen silent, save for the soft hum of energy grids and the occasional metallic clink as the apex predators shifted their massive forms. Kaela Rynn crouched slightly, careful not to appear threatening, yet exuding a quiet authority born not of fear, but of trust and understanding. The Deathworlder pup, once a machine of destruction, now hovered near her side, golden eyes fixed on her every subtle gesture. Kaela extended a hand, letting the faint glow of her neural interface reflect on the pup's scaled head. She whispered softly, almost as if sharing a secret, "You can trust me. I will not command, only guide." The words, though simple, carried unspoken power. The cub's ears twitched, their postures shifted imperceptibly, signaling recognition of Kaela's intent and empathy. She remembered the countless simulations, the graphs and predictive models that suggested obedience could only be enforced through neural conditioning and fear. Yet here she was, witnessing a phenomenon that no algorithm could quantify: loyalty born from choice, not compulsion. Kaela knew the stakes were enormous. If the Federation detected any deviation from the protocol as a deliberate act of defiance, they would immediately terminate her access and possibly the experiment entirely. Every step she took in the chamber carried risk. One false move could mean destruction for herself and the cubs. Yet she persisted. She crouched lower, letting her presence be non-threatening yet assertive, allowing the apex predators to see her as an ally, not a master. The Deathworlder pup mirrored her posture, its massive clawed foot shifting slightly, a subtle gesture of trust. Kaela felt a lump in her throat. Here, in the heart of the Federation's controlled environment, she was laying down the foundation of a bond that could change everything. One of the medium-sized cubs stepped forward, pressing its scaled snout lightly against her outstretched hand. Kaela felt the warmth of life, of intelligence in a creature designed to kill on command. Her mind raced. Can empathy truly override decades of genetic engineering? The answer, unfolding before her eyes, was a resounding yes. The cub's collective behavior now formed a protective perimeter around her. They were not obeying commands. They were acting in alignment with Kaela's intention and presence. Every movement was deliberate, every glance a silent acknowledgement of mutual understanding. She realized that this was more than a professional success. It was a personal victory. One of the smallest Deathworlder pups nudged her shoulder gently, a sign of recognition and affection within the boundaries of its species. Kaela smiled, understanding fully the gravity of what had just occurred. She had transformed these apex predators from weapons of the Federation into partners bound by trust and choice. Even as Kaela experienced this emotional triumph, the threat of the Federation lingered. Alarms had been silenced temporarily, but the observation decks remained occupied. High-ranking officers were reviewing data streams, trying to understand the anomalous loyalty displayed by the cubs. Kaela whispered again, this time more firmly, "Stand with me. We face them together." The cubs responded immediately, forming tighter formations around her. Their eyes, glowing softly, communicated more than instinct. They communicated decision, trust, and allegiance. Suspense hooks for voiceover. How far will the Federation go to regain control? Could one human really spark a larger rebellion among the apex predators? Will Kaela's influence survive the Federation's retaliation?
The chamber had fallen silent, save for the soft hum of energy grids and the occasional metallic clink as the apex predators shifted their massive forms. Kaela Rynn crouched slightly, careful not to appear threatening, yet exuding a quiet authority born not of fear, but of trust and understanding. The Deathworlder pup, once a machine of destruction, now hovered near her side, golden eyes fixed on her every subtle gesture. Kaela extended a hand, letting the faint glow of her neural interface reflect on the pup's scaled head. She whispered softly, almost as if sharing a secret, "You can trust me. I will not command, only guide." The words, though simple, carried unspoken power. The cub's ears twitched, their postures shifted imperceptibly, signaling recognition of Kaela's intent and empathy. She remembered the countless simulations, the graphs and predictive models that suggested obedience could only be enforced through neural conditioning and fear. Yet here she was, witnessing a phenomenon that no algorithm could quantify: loyalty born from choice, not compulsion. Kaela knew the stakes were enormous.
If the Federation detected any deviation from the protocol as a deliberate act of defiance, they would immediately terminate her access and possibly the experiment entirely. Every step she took in the chamber carried risk. One false move could mean destruction for herself and the cubs. Yet she persisted. She crouched lower, letting her presence be non-threatening yet assertive, allowing the apex predators to see her as an ally, not a master. The Deathworlder pup mirrored her posture, its massive clawed foot shifting slightly, a subtle gesture of trust. Kaela felt a lump in her throat. Here, in the heart of the Federation's controlled environment, she was laying down the foundation of a bond that could change everything. One of the medium-sized cubs stepped forward, pressing its scaled snout lightly against her outstretched hand. Kaela felt the warmth of life, of intelligence in a creature designed to kill on command. Her mind raced. Can empathy truly override decades of genetic engineering? The answer, unfolding before her eyes, was a resounding yes. The cub's collective behavior now formed a protective perimeter around her. They were not obeying commands. They were acting in alignment with Kaela's intentions and presence. Every movement was deliberate, every glance a silent acknowledgement of mutual understanding. She realized that this was more than a professional success. It was a personal victory. The smallest Deathworlder pup nudged her shoulder gently, a sign of recognition and affection within the boundaries of its species. Kaela smiled, understanding fully the gravity of what had just occurred. She had transformed these apex predators from weapons of the Federation into partners bound by trust and choice. Even as Kaela experienced this emotional triumph, the threat of the Federation lingered. Alarms had been silenced temporarily, but the observation decks remained occupied. High-ranking officers were reviewing data streams, trying to understand the anomalous loyalty displayed by the cubs. Kaela whispered again, this time more firmly, "Stand with me. We face them together." The cubs responded immediately, forming tighter formations around her. Their eyes, glowing softly, communicated more than instinct. They communicated decision, trust, and allegiance. Suspense hooks for voiceover. How far will the Federation go to regain control? Could one human really spark a larger rebellion among the apex predators? Will Kaela's influence survive the Federation's retaliation?
The Galactic Federation's command center was a controlled storm of blinking lights, holographic data streams, and hurried commands. Officers moved in precise patterns, but their faces betrayed a growing unease. The apex cubs, once predictable and subservient, had displayed unprecedented choice. Kaela Rynn, the human in the chamber below, had become a fulcrum of influence that the Federation could neither calculate nor suppress. For decades, the Federation had relied on genetic programming, neural overrides, and strict conditioning to ensure obedience. The concept that a single human could overcome these systems through trust and empathy was not in any operational manual. Every report, every simulation, every predictive model suggested absolute compliance, yet here they were, witnessing live footage that defied every expectation. General Thaler stood before the main display, his fingers drumming nervously against the console. "This is unprecedented," he muttered. "We trained these cubs for obedience, not loyalty." Officers exchanged glances, tension rising like a storm about to break. The data indicated neural spikes across the cubs, a synchronized behavioral shift that aligned with Kaela's subtle gestures and presence. Their programming was still active, yet overridden in critical moments. It was clear to everyone observing, Kaela had redefined the power dynamics between human and apex predator. Whispers began circulating in the corridors. If one human can achieve this, what does it mean for every other facility? Can trust now compete with decades of Federation programming? Have we underestimated the influence of human empathy? Even as these thoughts filled the minds of Federation officers, Kaela moved with calm precision in the chamber below. Her posture communicated control without force, authority without aggression, and connection without domination. The cubs, sensing her clarity and intent,
adjusted their positions subtly, creating a perfectly synchronized protective formation. The implications were immense. If one human could influence a small group of cubs, what might happen across the galaxy if similar methods were applied to other apex predators or even to the broader population of creatures under Federation control? Small disturbances in neural obedience could cascade through other training programs. Cubs from other facilities might begin to mirror the choices of their counterparts, inspired by subtle cues in Kaela's interactions. A single act of trust could ignite a larger chain reaction, challenging the Federation's strict hierarchy and exposing vulnerabilities in their entire system. Kaela, aware of these possibilities, focused on maintaining discipline and trust, understanding that her actions were not just tactical, but foundational. Every gesture, every glance, every carefully timed command reinforced the bond between her and the cubs. From the observation deck, the Federation officers began discussing contingency plans. Containment escalation. Increasing the neural override intensity could risk harming the cubs, potentially creating chaotic rebellion. Strategic assessment. Could the Federation negotiate with this new dynamic, or would they be forced into open conflict? Political ramifications. Across the Galactic Federation, word of this event could embolden colonies and sectors to question authority. The Deathworlder pup, leader of the formation, sensed the subtle unease in the human and reacted accordingly. Its massive tail swept across the floor, adjusting positions of other cubs, creating a dynamic but protective buffer around Kaela. It was not obedience, it was strategic, conscious loyalty, the kind that could change the trajectory of interstellar governance. Could the cubs' loyalty spark a wider uprising within the Federation's training facilities?
The training chamber was now silent, but not from fear or restraint. The apex cubs, massive and glowing with latent power, stood in perfect formation around Kaela Rynn, their postures calm but alert. Every officer monitoring the chamber from the Galactic Federation's observation deck could only watch, disbelief etched across their faces. Years of genetic programming and neural conditioning had been rendered secondary to a single human's influence. Kaela stepped forward, her voice steady yet soft. This isn't about obedience. It's about choice. Loyalty isn't given, it's earned. The cubs responded not with aggression, but with synchronized gestures that mirrored her own subtle movements. The largest Deathworlder pup, whose eyes had once glinted with instinctual ferocity, now lowered its head in a gesture of respect and trust, signaling to all the other cubs. They had chosen her, not out of command, but out of understanding and empathy. Across the observation deck, General Tharlor clenched his fists. Commands were issued in rapid succession, attempts to regain control through neural overrides, magnetic restraints, and automated drones. None succeeded. The cubs held firm. Their loyalty was not programmable. Their alignment was deliberate. Whispers turned into open debate among the Federation officers. Some suggested terminating the experiment, fearing that Kaela's methods might inspire rebellion in other sectors. Others, more cautious, realized that her approach had revealed a new form of leadership and influence, one that could benefit the Federation if understood properly. Yet, the reality was undeniable. The human had triumphed where technology alone had failed. A single human presence, guided by empathy, trust, and courage, had redefined the dynamic between apex predators and the authority that sought to control them. Just as Kaela and the cubs were settling into a calm formation, the main observation deck doors slid open. High-ranking officials, including the Galactic Federation's Supreme Commander, entered with hesitation. They were not met with rebellion or aggression. Instead, the cubs stood in unbroken formation, allowing the humans to approach without hostility. Kaela looked at them calmly, aware that this was the moment of reckoning. "We can either fight this change," she said firmly, "or we can embrace it. The cubs have shown that choice and trust are stronger than fear and programming." A murmur spread among the officers. The Supreme Commander's gaze lingered on the Deathworlder pup, now sitting obediently at Kaela's side. It was a subtle,
yet unmistakable acknowledgement of her influence. The implications of this moment stretched far beyond the training chamber. Across the Galactic Federation, other facilities began reporting unexpected behavioral alignment in apex predators inspired by Kaela's techniques. Colonies once fearful of predator-controlled squads now witnessed partnerships between humans and apex creatures guided by trust and empathy. The Federation's political councils debated new protocols, realizing that empathy and respect could achieve compliance far more efficiently than fear or coercion. Kaela, standing among the cubs, realized the full weight of what had been accomplished. This was not just a personal victory, it was a demonstration that human ingenuity and empathy could reshape systems of power. The cubs were no longer tools or weapons, they were partners and allies, bound not by fear, but by mutual understanding and loyalty.